We'll have time at the end, and we will come back on all these points. And so, if you've got questions, we make little notes of them, and we'll come back and do the Q&A at the end of this session. I'm going to ask Howard Thorpe, who, as I said before, some of you have just come in since then. He's our National Campaigns Coordinator with a seat on the Green Party Executive, which is known as GPEX, for any new members who are here. Howard will put this sort of campaigning and climate change and energy issues into sort of Green Party policy context for us, I think.
Yeah, I excuse me if I don't stand up because I've got sciatica at the moment and it hurts if I stand for any length of time.
Not a problem, don't worry.
Sorry, can I just make one suggestion? I don't know if you can...
I don't really want interruptions, so can we do this at the end?
No,
Unless there's something about hearing technical things.
Yes, because of your involvement with museums, and next door is talking about arts funding and cuts, it would be very appropriate if you could be there for 5 minutes to give them the business about what's happening in the museums. It's so important.
Well, maybe
the link
if
is
we
so
end
great.
early and Clara can pop in just at the end, but we need her here for the session.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, on the subject of museums, I wanted to say something quite optimistic right at the start, and that is that a lot of the stuff around dirty energy generation, coal-fired plants and fracking and all that kind of stuff is very soon going to be in a museum. You know, I'm actually very optimistic about the future, and I'll tell you why shortly. I want to start with a little disclaimer because I'm not an expert on Green Party energy policy, and those of you who've been in the plenary will know that the Green Party energy policy has been discussed at this conference, and it's quite a detailed document. I'm going to say one or two things about it, but I can't go through all of it. So going back to 2010, in the Green Party manifesto, we had a commitment to the Green New Deal. And the Green New Deal was basically a programme of large-scale insulation and energy efficiency. So the plan behind that was to go into thousands of homes around the UK and insulate them, and in the process employ hundreds of thousands of people. And that's a win-win situation because it means that you're cutting down on fuel poverty by insulating people's homes. This is one of the problems with fuel poverty, is the actual homes that people are living in. It's not just the fact they haven't got jobs, they're living in poor quality accommodation that's poorly insulated, and we have a lot of, as you'll no doubt be aware, there's a lot of housing in this country which is very poorly insulated. So the idea was to get people in there in a large-scale programme of publicly funded of energy insulation. So it's a win-win situation. You create jobs, you boost energy efficiency, you train people with skills, you cut down on fuel poverty, and you reduce the amount of carbon that you're outputting. And that really ties in very much with the campaign that Clara was talking about, 1 million climate jobs, because it's a very similar approach through the Green New Deal. So that's in our 2010 manifesto. Now the new Green Party policy is based on very similar lines. It's very much based on energy efficiency, which is incredibly important, but also reducing fossil fuel usage. And in doing that, and using renewables, you can reduce costs as well at the same time. So you can reduce costs by improving energy efficiency. You can reduce costs by using renewables. And I think one of the other key features of our energy policy is very much this idea of the democratisation of energy, local energy projects, locally controlled, separating the generation of energy from the distribution, which I think is a really important factor given the way the energy companies are operating at the moment, and giving people a much more local control of the way that energy works. Here's a little fact for you. Did you know now that 22% of global electricity is produced by renewables? Do people know that? Is that widely known? 22% globally of all energy comes from renewable
Where
sources.
did you get the figure? Because I think it would be more than that.
I can't remember off the top of my head where the figure came from now. It's reputable. That's obviously increasing, and those of you who follow renewables, which is one thing I've been doing, I've been looking at fracking and renewables over the past few years, will know that in places like Germany there's been a massive increase in the use of renewable energy. There are, I think, 7 states in Germany now which produce more than 100% of their energy requirements through renewables. In terms of things like wind power, the cost of wind power is now cheaper than fossil fuel. What many people don't appreciate is that fossil fuel use is actually the most heavily subsidised of all energy types. The fossil fuel attracts the biggest subsidy, and one of the things that you will hear as an objection to renewables is that people will say to you, well, the problem with renewables is they need all these subsidies. The reality is that when you add up all the tax breaks and all the hidden subsidies, fossil fuels are by far the highest subsidised energy sources that we have. So I think this is something we can be incredibly optimistic about it, because I think we know the environmental arguments, don't we? We know about climate change. We know that we need to reduce our carbon outputs. We know about the dangers of environmental pollution from things like fracking. But one thing that's going to kill the fossil fuel industry is economics. And that the big message is that energy generation from fossil fuels is becoming uneconomic by comparison with energy generation from renewables. And that is one thing that's absolutely certain to kill dirty energy. And if clean energy is going to replace dirty energy, there needs to be that economic advantage, and that economic advantage is growing all the time. Those of you who followed what's happened in America, they have produced enormous amounts of shale gas in America, but I wonder how many people know that for each well, the actual output falls by 90% within 12 months. So when you do your fracking, you frack a well, you get this output of shale gas, but it tails off very rapidly, and within 12 months it's dropped by 90%. And the only way that you can really get anything that's vaguely economically viable in terms of shale gas is by having thousands and thousands of wells. It's the only way you can do it. And if you think about somewhere like the US, where they have produced very large amounts of shale gas, they have not got the population density that we have. They are able to create thousands of wells in areas which aren't as densely populated as UK. Just imagine if you had to try and do that in England, for example, or Scotland, or Wales. Just imagine if you had to try and do that. It isn't going to happen, because people won't wear it. You cannot have a situation in a densely populated country like the UK where you're absolutely littering the landscape with thousands and thousands of fracking wells. And I think, just as an aside, I think the Tories are actually helping to dig their own grave by promoting fracking, because in the Tory heartlands, people are not going to stand for this kind of stuff. We're in a situation at the moment, we've seen a few isolated wells. We've had Balcombe as one example in Surrey. Was it Surrey or Sussex? Sorry, Sussex, that's right. We've had Balcombe as an example. We've seen the outcry there. That's just one site. If we start to get thousands of sites, which is what the government is proposing, then I really can't see that that's going to happen, personally. Other people may have a different view. So I think what I would take from all this, when we add it up, I completely agree with what Clara's saying, but I think that we can actually be quite optimistic about the future in energy terms, because renewables are becoming a much bigger part of the energy market. And I think a lot of the energy generators are now beginning to get incredibly worried that their business model is becoming uneconomic, that it's just not going to pay any longer. And if you think about the other great thing about renewables in terms of things like solar is you can decentralise energy production. You don't need to have a big energy plant somewhere that supplies a whole region. You can decentralise your energy supply, and that gives the possibility, Green Party policy aside, for a much greater degree of local control. You can have, obviously, on an individual level, you can have your own solar panels or your own wind generation, but it gives us the opportunity to have a much greater local control over the production of energy. And that is really what worries the big corporations. But I think the writing's on the wall. I'm very optimistic about it. And I think that a lot of these changes will happen without the need for some of this policy. I mean, it's good stuff, you know. It is good stuff. But I think that change is already beginning to happen. That's all I really wanted to say.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you very much, Howard. Well, I'm just going to come in at this point because I could think that the conversation could get quite animated and go in any one of many directions. What I would say is I think that our link that we are obviously clearly building with the trade union movement, and Peter Murray, who's secretary of the Green Party Trade Union Group, and myself, we've been involved for 5-6 years or more with Campaign Against Climate Change Trade Union Group and working on climate conferences where trade unions have been very enthusiastic, especially pre the banking crisis, but they were very enthusiastic to show that that climate change was a serious issue and that they were on board and they were becoming progressive, and it didn't always come to anything when there are threats to jobs, say when I'm having discussions with the GMB or possibly the energy sector in Unite and other areas. There are difficulties, and we're going to continue to have some difficulties. What I've tried to develop is a dialogue. As a Green Party member, I've tried to develop a dialogue talking about the future of work, because if they accept this sort of 2 degrees C that we mustn't go beyond, if they accept the IPCC reports of carbon emission reductions by set dates at some point in the future, it has to add up to a change in the way that we do things, a change in the way we generate energy, a change in the way that some of the industries are run. And so therefore the relationship between the Green Party and between the trade union movement is, I've always felt, absolutely crucial. And I think more and more of Green Party members are taking that on board. There's a couple of things I would say. If you're in a trade union, please consider signing up to the Green Party Trade Union email list. It's not heavy traffic. There's also, we've got a couple of Facebook pages by mistake. One of them I think is more open than the other, but I don't know. But it's somewhere you could post interesting articles or even questions to other members of the Green Party Trade Union Group where we can put things in. We can get Clara's petition. We can put that on there, we can put it on the email list, you can cascade that to your regions. The other thing we're doing, my role on GPEX, Trade Union Liaison Officer, just newly elected now, the conference decided they wanted that post, and they also said, and as soon as we can, let's get regional trade union liaison officers around the country in the Green Party. But I'm also saying, if your local party is big enough, have one in your local party as well. So as soon as you can, go back to your local party meetings, your regional party meetings, say, can we put that on the next agenda? Maybe select someone who's keen to start with, and then timetable a proper election at some further point. We can discuss things on the email list and and get organised and build a network with all the trade unions at a very local level, trades councils, etc. Together with trade unions, we can work for a just transition to a low zero carbon economy in the future, and that just transition is important because what it's about is making sure that we're not saying to anybody, we're going to close down that industry, you're all going to be on the dole. It won't be like Thatcher and the mines. It will be a just transition where we would hope to be able to keep people's incomes going while new industries are built, while retraining, reskilling or reallocation of work happens with a community involvement, because it's not just workers and jobs that affect the person with the wage packet, it affects their family, children, relatives, other people in their communities with other services. Everyone is affected when there's a question of an industry having to change. So please get involved in Green Party Trade Union group, email list, Facebook and everything, and start to build and see how these things are involved together, and talk to members in your own local and regional parties about building that up. So we will make sure that we cascade that petition. We'll get everybody in the Green Party to try and sign up to that as well. And then later on, can I say at 5 o'clock, if you're really interested in Green Party Trade Union Group, I am so impressed with the young Greens who have been asking for my help. I didn't really need very much, but they're giving me half the credit. They've got a fringe at 5 o'clock today, and it's about getting organised, and it's about the importance of trade unions, and they are launching a campaign this evening, 5 o'clock, at the end of that meeting, to say we are going to talk to everyone about to join the world of work, and we are going to encourage them to get unionised. And I think that's incredibly exciting, and 70% of our massive increase in membership has been in the 21 to 29-year-old age range. So all of this, I think, is very important. PCS are one of the most impressive, if not the most impressive trade union that we could, I hope, to work alongside, and I'm so happy that Clara could be with us today on that. I think we're going to now just run straight through into questions until we have to be thrown out of the room, and I will give some time to that. If either of you want to come in on a point after a question, just indicate, and you can join in with everybody else, even if you don't want to do a sum up at the end or anything. I'm going to start at the back and then I'll zigzag around. Would you like to stand up and sort of shout, because the columns are a bit of a sound?
Yeah, it's Claire with the Green Party. It's not so much a question as a statement.
Lovely.
National Climate Service is about the best thing I've heard proposed in the last 20 years. Completely support that we need one. An immediate response to something that's so dangerous that, to be honest, it's unprecedented. And a really bizarre question, is there an Ian Norris in the room? No? I'm trying to find the guy. But just basically, I did training in Istanbul. I'm a climate change leader. So I know a lot about the science and the IPCC and quite a bit of the science, although I'm not a scientist. And we really need an immediate response. And that's why I think the National Climate Service is really fundamental. And how we go about that, seeing as our National Health Service is like failing, I don't know, but we do need one.
Thanks very much. And gentleman in the shirt. Yeah.
I wish I was as optimistic as the speaker on my left, about fracking, because they are putting a lot of effort into it, and I think unless we put up a fight, we are going to see it.
Oh, I'm not saying we shouldn't put up a fight. Oh yeah, absolutely. We must do.
My major comment is about the fact I'm all for micro-generation, but I think we've got to be realistic about it. We are going to need high generating capacity points in the form of power stations, but we will also need a smart grid to connect all our sources and loads in a way that we get security 24/7. I would like you to comment on that. And it was music to me when you talked about nationalising the energy sector, because I'd love to see it renationalised, and I would be faced with a bill that I could understand, because right now people are inundated with a load of bureaucracy in the form of this, that, and how they choose. It's just nonsense, superficial competition, as I see it, creating jobs for the advertising industry at the expense of more serious things like the health service, etc. I think we've lost our way, and we want it nationalised. We want a smart grid, but I'd like to see it Europeanised, the smart grid. which brings us back to Desertec, and I realise the Green Party aren't too keen on that because I brought it up before. But I'd like a mini Desertec in the UK.
Thanks very much.
Can I
Yeah.
just respond to that before I
Yeah.
forget? Because I wasn't saying that we can do it all by,
Email.
no, I wasn't suggesting that we could completely decentralise our energy production and we can all just have our own panels or whatever. Obviously, there will be a need for things like wind farms, marine energy sources, tidal, all that kind of stuff. But I think that the thing I would add to that is that, one of the big objections that people have to wind farms is that they say, well, it's intermittent energy. I think one of the other really exciting developments at the moment is big storage of energy. There have been some breakthroughs recently in storing very large amounts of energy. I mean, essentially, you're talking about a very large battery storage, but it's beginning to look like that there's going to be the capacity to store large amounts of energy.
Can I just say, my last meeting with the GMB, they were talking about the grid, and I think it was Gary Smith said to me there are 11 separate companies at the moment who own different bits of the grid, and he was with me absolutely on that if we could renationalise that would make some sense, although he did think that me and that Caroline Lucas talked a lot of tosh about the renewable energy sector's prospects for jobs, which we don't agree on. Right, so those hands are back. I'm going to come back with those that had their hand up before, and I'm going to work my way forward. Was it on the right there, on the left, was it? All right, well, I'll come forward this way.
Sorry, but I have to get to the arts thing.
No, that's fine. No problem.
Okay, fuel poverty. The people who are in difficulties, members, do they not need to be a Green Party policy with regard to the elimination of standing charges, at least for those on benefits, if not completely eliminating them? And if as a first step, would it not be possible to try and get rid of Ofwat, which is really in the pocket of the industry, and ensure that that with their so-called simpler tariffs, that they allow people to have a no standing charge, because at the moment there are people who work away from home and hardly ever using it, that they have an awful lot of standing charge, or they may be using renewables an awful lot, producing most of their thing, and they still hammered by going from £0 to £200, which is now in the limit. This is many places now they've gone up to, because they're not allowed, as it were, to have virtually a zero standing charge because of the new because they didn't allow maybe 4 kinds of tariffs. So that's why companies can do that.
Okay, that's quite a lot of detail.
That's fuel poverty.
Yeah, no, can I just say, on that very point, because there are some new members, what you can do is we have a members website where only the members can talk about things. We have just done over 18 months work on an energy policy where anyone who'd been in the party before could have thrown those ideas in, and if they'd been widely accepted, that could have been incorporated. But that's something that our policies are always building and growing, and members can get involved on the website, and you put that idea, that's for the Green Party members to then discuss that, rather than maybe PCS have a view on it necessarily. I'll come back to you. If you've got a separate point on that, I'll come back to you.
Totally different point.
Right, very quickly then.
Sorry, that was the minor one. The major one, you're talking about nationalisation. The problem is with regard to the foreign ownership now of a lot of these companies. So the way around it perhaps is to have regulations which say companies must fulfil certain criteria if they are to be able to operate. They must customer service, renewables, having reserves, not cutting off people's electricity, not wasting. It could be made very, very, very difficult for these companies to fulfil the criteria. Hopefully, then they will fail, and then it can be removed. They can lose their contracts, and that way you can return to public ownership. It has to be worked out, surely, very carefully to make hurdles very, very difficult.
Thank you very much for that point. I've got someone at the back. No, sorry, I might come back to you later if you're still here. Could you stand up and so we can hear you?
Christian Green does the Green Party. Christian Green does the Green Party.
A bit louder, sorry.
Sorry. There's a company in Oxford called Evico that don't have standing charges for gas and electric. You can check them online. So I'm with them. I haven't paid a standing charge for 5 years.
Put it on the Facebook page and
I
share the
£10
information.
electric and gas, and it lasts me a fortnight.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Can I just come back on
Yes.
on this?
Sorry,
Yeah.
these are questions I might.
No, you can't do a whole row of questions. One person at a time.
I mean, I won't comment on the standing charge. It's up to the Green Party to do their own policies. But what I would say is that in 2008, the government found £800 billion to bail out the banks, and also has actually brought back some companies, including banks, into public ownership when they fail. So I think the state is able to take over a private company if there is a political will. I don't think that